I'd really like you guys to understand these differences. We'll go through these kind of quickly. These are all the differences between destructiveness and constructiveness. John Nash, with his Nash equilibrium and the very notion of win-win versus win-lose behavior, it's an amazing economic theory, Nobel Prize-winning theory, in part, I think, because it's actually a mathematical proof of a spiritual idea, which is pretty amazing. A mathematical proof of a spiritual idea. It's proof of karma. It's proof that what comes around goes around. Does that make sense? What do I mean by that? When we have a habit that's destructive, that's win-lose, in the short run, we benefit from it. We take advantage of others, sort of like Edmond Dante's best friend, Ferdinand. He's this win-lose guy, this destructive friend, so to speak. But sooner or later, he's going to be found out. It's sort of like the Enrons of the world. You can profit greatly in the short run by being destructive, but sooner or later you get found out. Well, the difference between being destructive and constructive amounts to all the characteristics of boyhood versus all the characteristics of manhood. And so I have two lists for you that are shown. Immediate gratification as a boy, a destructive boy, we need to learn to change to delayed gratification as a constructive man. Not recognizing others and respecting them, to recognizing others and respecting them. Weak observing ego to advanced observing ego. And what I'm about to show you, poor conscience and poor intuition to strong conscience and strong intuition. And we've already covered that the childish side of psychology is poorly defined boundaries too, holes in your boundary. Well-defined boundaries with doors are mature. Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about decision-making and the spectrum for it. I promised you that there is a spectrum for each of the three kinds of internal resource. And if we learn to master each of the two ends of a spectrum, we've mastered what? Everything in between. Okay? So for our decision-making resource, and remember, this is pretty important too, because we said decisions are the definition of life. We'll draw a spectrum. On the one end is conscience or ethics. And this is what Edmond Dantes had plenty of. A little bit too much of. But on the other end of the spectrum for our decision making is intuition. Both of these two things drive every decision you make. Now, what do I mean by intuition? Because I am using words that work for me, and words are imperfect as symbols. You might have a better word that works for you. What I mean by intuition is a sort of worldly wisdom, a shrewdness. Did anybody notice where on this spectrum was Edmond Dantes at the beginning of the story? He was way out, maybe this far on the spectrum. Lots of conscience, what Freud called being top-heavy on superego, and lacking a kind of worldly wisdom. Okay? Well, conscience is an inner sense of knowing whether your motives are destructive or constructive, and intuition is an inner sense of knowing whether various environments are being constructive or destructive to you. Does that make sense? So one sort of looks in, and the other end sort of looks out at the environments and tries to balance the two and make judgments. The perfect place to be with your decision-making ability is actually dead center. And I'll explain why. What if I had a decision to make, but I didn't tell you much about the environment I'm making it in? What if the decision was, should I fire a gun? Is there a right or wrong answer to that? No? Somebody who's very, very top-heavy on conscience might say there is. You should never fire a gun, period. Okay? Do you remember old Saturday Night Live church lady? Okay? There's a bunch of characters like that are sort of victim-y, top-heavy on conscience, and very unaware of various environments. What if instead of just saying, should I fire a gun, I gave you more info about the environment? What if I said, should I fire a gun on the Strip, Las Vegas Strip? Is there probably a right or wrong answer to that? Yeah, it's probably a poor decision, a destructive decision that would show maybe poor conscience on my part, because what are my ethics like if I'd be willing to do that? Or poor intuition on my part, because, how dumb could I be to not realize that environment is not a good environment to do that in? What if instead, though, I said, should I fire a gun while I'm with special forces in Iraq and I'm under fire? Is there a right or wrong answer probably to that? Probably so. It might show lack of conscience or lack of intuition to not fire the gun in that environment. Does this give anybody any new insight or ideas you haven't had before?
One of the things you said was that Edmond had showed a lack of intuition, a lack of worldly knowledge, street smarts, really, in the beginning. And in the end, though, before the very end, he really swung over to this side.
Yeah.
The pendulum really swung over to where there was very little ethics.
Conscience. Yeah.
Right?
Great point. It's sort of like a stereographic equalizer, okay, where we're able to actually tweak the knob of, no pun intended. So at the beginning of the story, he's way too top-heavy on conscience. As Dave just pointed out, he's going after revenge toward the middle when he gets out. Too much intuition. This is sort of the mama's boy and the martyr on this end. And this is sort of the shark. This is the Enron, okay? Bad boys have a lot of intuition. It means that you've been very experienced at sampling environments. You know many different environments and what is destructive about some of them and what is constructive about other ones. So what happens is, if you think of these two ends of the spectrum for decision making as being sort of like two pots. When you're born, how full are these pots? What? They're empty. We don't have ethics the moment we're born. We don't have intuition, certainly, about the world the moment we're born. We have empty tanks. What fills these up? Simply this: making decisions and noticing what you get. Okay? So this could be an encouragement to you. Has anybody been a procrastinator in this room? Great. Has anybody tried to work themselves up to a decision to approach a woman and then back down? Okay. What kept you from going right ahead and approaching? Okay, fear. That's the emotional part. But the decision part of why you didn't approach is that you were thinking there's a good chance this could be destructive. Right? And you want it to be a constructive result with this woman. Well, I want you to know that anything that happens is good and all right, as long as you make the decision to go for it. Why? Because every decision you make, whether constructive or destructive, fills up both pots with some, walking the high wire, fills up both pots with both conscience and intuition for you. Even if you fail on any given try again.
Did you notice what he said? bad decisions.